So UFC Fight Night Vegas 28, Rozenstruik versus Sakai takes place this weekend, and I'm going to go through the entire card, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main event, giving my prediction and breakdown for every single fight on the card. And although this card does not have the best main event in the world, actually I would say it doesn't even have a main event. It is actually a really good card with a bunch of fun matchups up and down the card on the prelims and the main card alike. I'm going to start with the early prelim opener of Claudio Puelles versus Jordan Leavitt. Really like this fight. I have no idea why it's opening up the card. In fact, I could see this one on the main card opening it up. So I don't know why it's opening up the early prelims. Either way, it's an amazing bout. I'm not complaining. We get something to look forward to at the start of the night. Claudio Puelles versus Jordan Leavitt. I loved seeing Jordan Leavitt slam KO Matt Wyman. I don't know why he's on the early prelim opener. Like, I feel like Jordan Leavitt is getting a little bit of, like, fan attraction. People are liking what they're seeing with him. He does seem very promising as a contender. 8-0 now, undefeated. Looked really good before his last fight with Matt Wyman as well. I know a lot of people just remember the slam KO that he had, but he's got really nasty jiu-jitsu transitions. He's a real grinding fighter. He's like a wet blanket on the ground. I think he's going to be able to out-grapple Claudio Puelles, because we've seen some people have some success against Claudio Puelles earlier in his career with the grappling. I like him very much. He's got a good team around him. He's had Jesus Pinedo was also a guy from his gym that used to be in the UFC, cut himself from the UFC to develop and get better because he's still a younger guy. He's with a good gym at Pitbull Martial Arts Center. I really like Claudio Puelles. I just feel like he hasn't really beaten anyone. Like, his last opponent was Marcos Mariano. I know it was a little bit of a short notice replacement, but it wasn't even. It was just like a last minute scrap put together. Why would they ever sign Marcos Mariano? The guy's 6-5. But either way, Claudio Puelles got the job done against him. He just didn't show me that dominance. He took him to a decision. He landed a bunch of total strikes on the ground in that fight. But we've seen guys be able to out-grapple him in certain moments. I know eventually he got the win over Felipe Silva in their fight. But before that, Felipe Silva was really quite handily beating Claudio Puelles in that bout. But yeah, he got the job done in later rounds, so he is always going to be dangerous, but he was really kind of getting exposed in that Felipe Silva fight. He had a couple of good takedown attempts, wasn't really able to control him on the ground, Felipe Silva came back, got some takedowns of his own, ended up controlling for about 3 minutes and landing some good ground and pound shots, and landing great shots on the feet as well, until eventually getting caught with something in the third round. I feel like we've seen lesser grapplers than Jordan Leavitt, in my opinion, be able to implement a grappling game effectively against Claudio Puelles. There's always a chance he goes out there and does something real good and maybe upsets it, because he is a young guy at 25, but again, Jordan Leavitt's a young guy as well, and I think he's got a lot of potential, 25 years of age himself. I think he'll go out there and get the job done. He's got a lot of momentum right now. He's barely taken any damage throughout his entire career, which is always nice to see. Like, Claudio Puelles has been in some fights where he's had a couple of knocks on the chin here and there. I feel like he's gonna lose to Jordan Leavitt by submission in the first round. I'll go with Jordan Leavitt, late first round, arm triangle submission over Claudio Puelles, and I think he gets it done that way. Moving on up the card to the next fight, Sean Woodson versus Youssef Zalal. I'm going to be going with Sean Woodson here. I just feel like this is going to be one of those fights where we start to consider maybe, and I know that people don't like weight cutting, but this is going to be a real consideration for Youssef Zalal to move down in weight, in my opinion. I like that he's a real active guy. I like that he's got good cardio for the division. I like that he's got good volume as well. But I feel like Sean Woodson is just going to be way too rangy for Youssef Zalal. I like Youssef Zalal. I thought he was very good at one point. I feel like he made the mistake in his career of taking too many fights and not really giving himself enough time in the middle of that to sort of, you know, improve as a fighter. Like, there was a moment where this guy was taking fights like every 3 months, it felt like. Every 2 months, it felt like as well. I think now he's kind of learned that lesson. He's learned it twice in a row. I don't think he's going to go out there and beat Sean Woodson either way. He's still coming back 4 months later, so there's no, like, learning going on. I don't know what he's doing. If I was Youssef Zalal right now, I'd reinvent myself over a 7-6 month period and then come back afterwards. But no, he's taken a fight against Sean Woodson. He's already on a 2-fight losing streak. I could see him getting cut from the UFC, but we'll see if he pulls this one off. He could have a really good story, like a Charles Oliveira type situation where he's young but thrown to the wolves, loses a couple but eventually comes out on top. I just don't see him being big enough or rangy enough to hang with Sean Woodson in their fight. I think Sean Woodson's going to be way too rangy, and just pick him apart from range for 3 rounds, it's just too much of a difference, in my opinion, for Youssef Zalal to get over. We saw against Sungwoo Choi was able to keep Youssef Zalal at range with good strikes. Sean Woodson is 6'2" at featherweight. 78-inch reach. He's got a good chin. I know he eventually got finished by Julian Erosa in the last fight, but we've learned since then that Julian Erosa's quite good still, and still doing good things. He's now on a win streak in the UFC. I think I'm going to go with Sean Woodson. He took some time off after his loss. Now he's back. We'll see what he's improved on. I think he'll get the job done against Youssef Zalal by unanimous decision, 30-27, outlanding Zalal every single round, and I don't see Zalal having the option to grapple either. Moving on up the card, Montana De La Rosa versus Ariane Lipski. Now, I'm going to go with Montana De La Rosa, I think. Little bit bigger, little bit younger, little bit more experience against better competition, I would argue, as well. Went to a draw in her last fight with Mayra Bueno Silva, but arguably she could have won that one in all honesty. But either way, I feel like she's going to be able to sort of stalemate Ariane Lipski. Do quite good on the feet. I don't see really great striking from Ariane Lipski so far in her career. I know she's probably got some decent striking. I know she has a good submission over Luana Carolina by knee bar. Maybe that's something we can look at here in terms of grappling situations. But I just feel like Montana De La Rosa, I'm watching both of them fight. I'm watching Montana De La Rosa, and she just looks a little bit better than Ariane Lipski. She looks stronger. She keeps a good pace in a fight as well. Really good pace in a fight. She's got good cardio. She can grind against the cage. She's got grappling. She's got stand-up. I think she's got more options than Ariane Lipski, and I think she's going to outdo her over 3 rounds in maybe like a 29-28 decision. Very close, very competitive. Maybe Ariane Lipski has some moments, but I think overall Montana De La Rosa is going to win the duration of the fight, whereas maybe Lipski has a couple of moments where she has a submission attempt or something like that. I think Montana De La Rosa is going to sort of stalemate this out, half guard on top, landing total strikes, landing little shots at range on the feet, and win herself a decision. Moving on up the card, again in the women's flyweight division, Manon Fiorot versus Marina Moroz. I'm going with Manon Fiorot, okay? She's a very manly woman, and I like the way she strikes. She looks like a good striker. She looks like a decent grappler as well in certain moments that I've seen. She actually looks good, so she wins. And don't get me wrong, Marina Moroz, not someone to be slept on in this situation. Marina Moroz is a decent contender herself. Had some good wins in the UFC. She's coming on a win streak right now over Mayra Bueno Silva and Sabina Marzo. Lost to Angela Hill, Carla Esparza, but both by decision. Not really anything to sort of be upset about. Those are 2 pretty good contenders in the women's strawweight division right now. Moving up now to the women's flyweight division to take on Manon Fiorot. She's already been adjusted to the division. It's a move that she made a little bit ago. I still believe that Manon Fiorot's going to get the job done. I know she's lost at one point in her career in the early part to Leah McCourt by split decision. I thought she won that fight. So, like, she's arguably undefeated right now. And she's looking pretty good. And she genuinely looks like a decent fighter. And also, she has wins in the 3rd round. Usually the French quit after the 1st round, as history dictates. But this one, she's got finishes in the later rounds. She's got grappling experience. She's had grappling bouts where she's done quite well. Again, I thought she beat Leah McCourt. I think she's going to do very well in the UFC. She had a long amateur career. She had a long combat sports career as well. I just think she's actually good. And that's something that you don't see often in women's divisions, especially women's flyweight. So I'm going to go with Manon Fiorot getting a TKO round 1 or 2 against Marina Moroz. Moving on up the card, Alan Patrick versus Mason Jones. Great fight. I'm going with Mason Jones here. I think Alan Patrick is probably coming to the end of his career. There was a moment in his career where he's actually a bit of a dangerous contender, and I kind of respected his game a little bit, like he was doing quite well in his career. Around the Scott Holtzman time, then after that, he took a long time off after getting TKO'd by Scott Holtzman. He doesn't really seem like the same level of guy he was. And even in his early part of his career, he had a good win over John McDessie, which was a very good win. He's got Stevie Ray, Damir Hadzovic. Those wins haven't really aged too well right now. Both of those guys are on a chopping block or have already been chopped from the block, in all honesty. Got TKO'd by Scott Holtzman. That loss hasn't aged too well. Scott Holtzman got destroyed recently by Beneil Dariush. No shame there, though. So did Tony Ferguson. Bobby Green managed to get a good win over him. And it just seems like Alan Patrick just... Again, this is the Tony Ferguson situation. I just brought him up. it's not even a skill thing anymore. It's just kind of like a testosterone thing. Do you have the grind? Do you have the grit in your teeth to go and commit to something if you're losing a fight, to try and go out there and win? I saw that from Mason Jones against Mike Davis. I think he's just going to be the younger guy out there, the hungrier man. I think he's better in all areas. Alan Patrick maybe has a jiu-jitsu advantage, but I think that Mason Jones makes up for that just based on being a young man who's energetic and explosive and still has that point in his career where he's very explosive. And I feel like he's going to be able to stop the jiu-jitsu of Alan Patrick. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, Mason Jones. I like his jiu-jitsu as well. We saw it against Mike Davis a little bit in his career. I like that. And Mike Davis took him down a couple of times by surprise. Mason Jones got back up to his feet pretty well each time, and usually fighters from the UK don't really deal too well with the grappling. I know Mike Davis is not the level of grappler that Alan Patrick is, but I still believe that Mason Jones is going to win. It says it's a welterweight bout. I've seen an interview of Mason Jones that claims it's not a welterweight bout. It's actually happening at lightweight. No idea why it's saying welterweight. Either way, I think Mason Jones goes out there, gets it done. Good cardio. I think he'll win 29-28. I think there's going to be some risky moments in round one. I actually might call a third round TKO for Mason Jones. Risky moments in round one. Maybe Alan Patrick gets a takedown. Mason Jones gets back up. Maybe Alan Patrick gets a hook in on the back. Then in the second round, I think Mason Jones is going to start to get the better of him. Then in the third round, I think Mason Jones is going to really start to get the better of him and finish him with knees against the cage in the third round. Mason Jones gets it done. I just think Alan Patrick doesn't have the cardio anymore, and his jiu-jitsu has been a little bit figured out by guys like Scott Holtzman. I think Mason Jones can do quite well. Very touted prospect. I know he arguably could have won the Mike Davis fight, but he lost it. And now he's training at a better gym with Uriah Faber and the boys. I think he'll get it done against Alan Patrick. Moving on up the card, Francisco Trinaldo versus Muslim Salikhov. I'm going to go with Muslim Salikhov. I like Francisco Trinaldo. He's on a win streak right now in his old age, and same with Muslim Salikhov, really. You can't really call him a young guy, even though he is an up-and-coming prospect. I kind of like Muslim Salikhov here over a distance, right? Francisco Trinaldo, Muslim Salikhov. I would argue this is not going to be a very entertaining fight. I think this is probably going to be a little bit of a stalemate striking match between the two of them. Both guys going to be a little bit hesitant to engage. Trinaldo, of course, coming up a division since recently beating John McDessie in the third round. Jai Herbert, in the third round. John McDessie by decision. Bobby Green, a little bit controversial of a decision there, but still he has a win over Bobby Green. I just think Muslim Salikhov's going to be a little bit too strong in the grappling situations. I think that Muslim Salikhov's going to give Francisco Trinaldo a rude awakening into the welterweight division. Be a little bit too big for him. Be a little bit too fast on the feet. And I think he's just going to be the way more technical striker. And I see this taking place on the feet. So I'm going to go with Muslim Salikhov. 30-27. Unanimous decision. A little bit of a shit fight, but whatever. Moving on up the card. Tanner Boser versus Ilir Latifi. Now, I'm taking the dog here, I think. Am I taking the underdog? I am taking the underdog here. Tanner Boser is the favourite. And he's a big favourite as well. Ilir Latifi kind of beat Derek Lewis. Right? Curtis Blades couldn't take down Derek Lewis. These light heavyweights are kind of good compared to the heavyweights skill-wise. And Ilir Latifi, now he's sort of built himself into the weight class. He's had a first fight against Derek Lewis, and I thought arguably he could have won that one, but whatever. Lewis did the damage. Latifi had the control. One of them ones where it could go either way. I don't really mind. I feel like Ilir Latifi's going to go out there and take Tanner Boser down and just sit in half guard and total strike him for 3 rounds and win. I'm going to go with Ilir Latifi, 30-27. I think he's going to be too good at grappling for Tanner Boser. I like Tanner Boser. I love his stand-up. He's not the biggest guy in the division. And if Ilir Latifi can fucking get a single leg against the cage on Derek Lewis and literally pick him up and dunk him on the canvas, I reckon he's going to be able to do that to Tanner Boser as well. And if he can't do that to Tanner Boser, but he can do it to Derek Lewis, and Derek Lewis can stop Curtis Blades from getting him down, then the world makes no fucking sense. I'm going with Ilir Latifi here. I think he's going to out-grapple Tanner Boser for 3 rounds and show him that light heavyweights have got some skill. I think that Ilir Latifi gets it done, 30-27, unanimous decision. Grappling too good. Moving on up the card, Makwan Amirkhani versus Kamuela Kirk. Speaking of grappling too good, I'm going with Makwan Amirkhani here against Kamuela Kirk. I feel like Kamuela Kirk actually would be an underdog if he was on full camp. The fact that he's taken this basically the week of the fight nearly Don't know how I feel about that one. He's had a week and a half of training. He's got to make the weight class as well, and he's not a small guy for the weight class either. He's a big man. He's got a long reach. I actually think Kamuela Kirk can be a superstar. I think he really can be. He reminds me of a mixture of Conor McGregor and Mike Perry, just the way he is as a person. I think he actually could be a big name in the sport if he pulls this one off, which I don't see happening. So I'm going to go against him here, rooting for him though, because we kind of need some new blood in the featherweight division. We've seen Makwan Amirkhani lose to those top guys, but even still, he got takedowns on Edson Barboza. He got takedowns on Shane Burgos. I think he even won the first round against Shane Burgos with his grappling. I think the way to beat Makwan Amirkhani is to have good cardio and be able to outlast him as the fight goes on and eventually get the better of him. We've seen this done before by guys like Arnold Allen, Shane Burgos, and Edson Barboza. I mean, even Edson Barboza, a guy who does slow down in that third round. Makwan couldn't really do anything to him in that round, and Edson was a little bit too explosive in those early rounds as well. I don't see the explosivity from Kamuela Kirk in those early rounds to catch Makwan Amirkhani on the chin. I think he will be defending a lot of takedowns early, and on short notice, and also being a guy who doesn't have the best of cardio anyway, because I've seen him slow down in fights before. He was on the Contender Series against Billy Quarantillo. Again, slowed down in the third round there, got TKO'd. Wasn't even concussed or dropped. He just got TKO'd because he couldn't defend himself because he was so tired. I feel like Makwan Amirkhani is going to get this one. You either need really massive power in the first 2 rounds, or really good cardio. I don't see Kamuela Kirk with either of those things. I think Makwan Amirkhani gets this one done. I'll say decision 29-28. I actually think Kamuela Kirk might have a good third round. I just don't think he's going to have enough in that third round to make something happen. And that sounds crazy, but that's really how much Makwan Amirkhani slows down. I'm going 29-28 Makwan Amirkhani. I don't think he'll get a finish by submission, but I think he'll control the first 2 rounds, and Kamuela Kirk won't have enough time in the third to do anything big. So Makwan gets it done by decision. Moving on up the card, Tom Breese versus Antonio Arroyo. The card layout makes no fucking sense to me. The main card fights, some of them are worse than the early prelim ones. But either way, Tom Breese, Antonio Arroyo, good scrap. Tom Breese, still young. Even though he's been around for a while, still 29 years of age. Got a career ahead of him. He's got a good 3 years maybe to try and make something happen in the middleweight division. And I can't see him losing to Antonio Arroyo, I'm sorry. I will not pick Antonio Arroyo in a bout. And if you've watched Antonio Arroyo fight anyone, you'll know why I don't want to pick him in any fight. Because he's just a little bit shit. And he's a big guy, usually, for other middleweights. Tom Breese is also a massive guy. So I think that's going to kind of take away the only advantage Arroyo had. Arroyo's big advantage was that I'm going to be bigger than you. I'm going to be rangier than you. And now he's got a guy in Tom Breese who's as big as him and as rangy as him with the same reach. I feel like Tom Breese is going to show a technical difference against Antonio Arroyo. And I'll say second round finish for Tom Breese. I don't know how he's going to do it. He might drop Arroyo and then go for a submission afterwards. But as this fight goes on, I think the cardio difference is going to be very apparent. I think Tom Breese is going to get the better of him in the later half of the fight. I'll say at the end of the second round, Tom Breese locks in a rear naked choke. Something simple. Something against a tired opponent who's sort of given up his back in certain situations. I think Breese is going to get a takedown in the first round, not really do anything with it. In the second round, he'll get another takedown, start landing big shots on Arroyo, and then get a rear naked choke. I just don't like Arroyo's. He's shit. Basically what it is. And Breese is okay, and I don't mind someone losing to Omari Akhmedov, because Marvin Vettori could have well lost to Omari Akhmedov. So I'm going to go with Tom Breese here, getting it done. Moving on up the card, Dusko Todorovic versus Gregory Rodriguez. I'm going with Dusko Todorovic, but I worry about him. Okay, and this is a worrying pick for me, in all honesty. I like Dusko Todorovic. He is very good at fighting. There are just some openings in his game that I just don't like to see. Just the way he rears his head back sometimes. I think someone in my chat mentioned it before the last fight that he had, and I was like, yeah, but he'll be okay against Pinelli Soriano. Soriano didn't look good on the Contender Series, and I was mentioning all that. But he does have a bit of an opening, the way he rears his head back sometimes. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think Gregory Rodriguez is not going to be the kind of guy Pinelli Soriano is to catch him in that first round. Pinelli Soriano's got some real power in that first round. He's really looking good recently as well. I don't see Gregory Rodriguez getting this one done. Hasn't really fought the best of competition. Lost to Jordan Williams on the Contender Series and got KO'd in the first round. I think I'm going to go with Dusko getting this one done. I think Gregory Rodriguez Not the best of records. Hasn't really fought the best of opponents. Dusko Todorovic had a pretty good debut, let's not forget, against Daquan Townsend, where he just dominated him start to finish pretty much. Had some close moments where he took some shots, but eventually got back up. And, oh, he didn't get back up. He didn't even get dropped in that fight, but he just got it done, grinded on him, got the finish on the ground. I think he's just going to wear out Gregory Rodriguez. And the fact that Rodriguez has taken this on reasonable short notice, because Maki Pitolo was the original opponent, just makes me not like his chances even more. I'm going to go with Dusko Todorovic, but there's a chance he gets chinned in the first round because he doesn't have a very fortified chin, and his defense in striking's a little bit weird, but I haven't really seen anything from Gregory Rodriguez to say that he's amazing, so I'm going to go Dusko Todorovic. I think he'll learn from his mistake, come back, he's still young, and I think he'll put it on Gregory Rodriguez and finish him by TKO in the second round. Moving on up the card, Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Miguel Baeza. I'm going to go with Miguel Baeza here. I like Santiago Ponzinibbio. He's got a better resume, he's got a better record, but his time off does seem to have changed some things on how aware he is in that first round, and I just feel like he can't hang anymore, really, with these other guys. He's had a lot of injuries, a lot of illnesses, a lot of things to hold him back from training. Like, Santiago Ponzinibbio didn't have time off where he was just training his game and making it all perfect. He had time off where he had to recover from things. So he hasn't really been training during that time off, and against Li Jingliang, got KO'd very, very badly. Extremely badly. And he's back in the fucking cage before Li Jingliang. So Li Jingliang, Santiago Ponzinibbio, both guys fight each other. Li Jingliang sparks out cold Santiago Ponzinibbio in the first round. Santiago Ponzinibbio is back in the cage before him. Just what, 4 months later, dude? You're going to get chinned again by Miguel Baeza. And Miguel Baeza, I'm not just saying that because of how Santiago Ponzinibbio looked. Miguel Baeza is a real contender in that division now. He came in, looked a little bit green, but he has vastly improved since the Matt Brown fight. Took some time, came back against Takashi Sato. He's training with Colby Covington right now as well. He's got great grappling, great submissions off of his back, great submissions in general. Goes to submissions after hurting his opponent with strikes, which takes a level of education and IQ, in all honesty, to not just go there. And anytime I see a guy just like flurry hammer fists on someone, it kind of seems a little bit bad IQ to just swing like that, like Yair Rodriguez did against Jeremy Stephens in the early rounds of their fight. I like that someone rocks someone, checks him out on the ground. What submission can I get from here? I like his IQ. I like his awareness. I like his striking, which seems to be improving more and more each fight. I think he'll rock Santiago Ponzinibbio and get a submission against him on the ground afterwards. And I'm going to go with Miguel Baeza. Not submission. I'll go with TKO for Miguel Baeza first round. I think he'll catch Santiago Ponzinibbio, because it wasn't even that Jingliang just caught him. Ponzinibbio was making a lot of technical mistakes against Jingliang, and Miguel Baeza's got really fast hands, a lot of power, undefeated, very confident. I think he'll get the job done against Ponzinibbio by first round TKO. Moving on up the card to the feature fight of the card. Roman Dolidze versus Laureano Strapoli. No idea about the layout of this card, but that's the feature fight above all of the other ones I've mentioned this card. Roman Dolidze's probably going to win, but I've lost a little bit of faith in him, in all honesty. I'm worried about him, and if this wasn't a Laureano Strapoli from the welterweight division taking this on short notice up a weight class, I probably wouldn't pick Roman Dolidze against a regular opponent. I was actually going to go with Alessio De Chirico in this fight, but Laureano Strapoli steps up on short notice. I just think to beat Roman Dolidze, you've got to have good cardio in the later rounds. I thought Dolidze actually beat Trevin Giles, even though I kind of dislike his style and how he fights. But I think he's going to get it done against Laureano. He's just a little bit too big for him, man. A little bit too big, a little bit too strong. I think he's just going to manhandle him in the grappling if he wants to and do good on the striking in the early rounds. I think he'll outstrike Laureano Strapoli round 1 and then sort of cruise by with the grappling in round 2 and 3 and just beat Laureano Strapoli based on stalemating out half guard on the ground in the later rounds. I don't see Strapoli getting it done, let alone on short notice when you've got to really make a comeback in round 3 against Roman Dolidze to do anything against him. I'm going to go with Roman Dolidze. Decision. Lackluster in the later rounds. Moving on up the card, Walt Harris versus Marcin Tybura. I'm going with Marcin Tybura. I like Walt Harris. I think he's got real fast hands early. So, listen, man, Marcin Tybura's kind of made a name for himself recently against going up against guys who have got good hands early on, who are going to try and KO him early on in the fight, and he's found a way to grind his way back into it against Ben Rothwell. Rothwell tried to empty out the gas on him and get him finished in the first round. Tybura takes it, stays defensively aware, keeps his block up with one arm. He's very weird the way he blocks punches, but it seems to work in his fights. I like it. I think he's going to be able to ride out the storm of Walt Harris in the first round, and Walt Harris, he was shown a hole in his game. Okay, and this is what I cannot stand with fighters. When Marcin Tybura loses, he comes back with a vengeance and goes on a bit of a streak in his career. Walt Harris was shown a massive hole in his game, which was his cardio against Alistair Overeem. He had one flurry of punches in him, and other than that, he got really badly... He had one flurry of punches in him, and after that, he got completely gassed out afterwards. Completely gassed out. Next fight comes around. Walt Harris, what does he do? Goes out there against Volkov, has a little bit of a couple of flurries in him, completely gasses out again in the second round, eventually gets finished with a front kick to the body. I just don't like that, man. I think I'm going to go with Marcin Tybura, making Walt Harris work. I mean, Tybura has been KO'd in his career before by Derek Lewis, especially in the third round, which is something a lot of people remember. What people won't remember is the fact that Derek Lewis smacked him on the chin in the early rounds of that fight, and Tybura came back to get on top, to land some big shots of his own with ground and pound. I like the way he can grind through damage. He had a couple of KO losses in a row against Shamil Abdurakhimov and Augusto Sakai, but I think now he's a little bit more defensively aware, and we've seen that in his recent fights. He beat Sergey Spivak, who's now doing real well for himself, Maxim Grishin, who's now doing pretty good if you count his win over Jacoby. He's beat Ben Rothwell, who's now doing really good, Greg Hardy. We'll see how he bounces back, but I think Tybura's got the answer if he just survives the first round and tries to implement his grappling as the fight goes on, and I think Tybura is going to get this one done by TKO in the second round to ground and pound on a gassed out Walt Harris, because he just doesn't change. He just comes in exactly the same shape, exactly the same fighting style, exactly the same outcome, twice in a row. What the fuck are your coaches doing? I'm going with Marcin Tybura. He's actually made improvements after losses, whereas Harris just seems to just do the same fucking thing every time. I'm going with Marcin Tybura. Moving on up the card, Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Augusto Sakai. I'm going with Augusto Sakai. I'm done with Rozenstruik. Can't do it. I'm going with Augusto Sakai. He's not even a big underdog, and everyone is picking Rozenstruik. I'm genuinely picking Augusto Sakai. I think there is a hatred of fighters based on things that are completely out of their control. People don't like that he grabbed the cage against Blagoy-Ivanov, and that's kind of why he won the fight by split decision, because he didn't get taken down in that moment. But, like, he's actually kind of good, man. He beat Marcin Tybura, first round KO against the cage, battered him against the cage. Rozenstruik, Sakai against the cage. You know what I'm saying? Problems there, in my opinion. He's got a real good style. He had a very close fight with Andrei Arlovski. I think that could have gone Arlovski's way, but Arlovski can beat a lot of opponents. I know Rozenstruik one-punch KO'd Arlovski, but that just shows different styles, in my opinion. It's kind of hard to grind out Arlovski in comparison to landing a big shot in the first round on Arlovski. Your odds are a little bit different with those two approaches. Either way, beat Chase Sherman, took him down, and battered him on the ground in that fight in the later rounds as well. And I kind of want to use the Alistair Overeem fight because it's the most recent fight that is there in both of their records. Overeem was just straight up beating Rozenstruik. Sakai was whooping the shit out of Overeem in those early rounds. Then Overeem had to implement the grappling. Overeem went straight to it against Rozenstruik with no issue whatsoever. And Rozenstruik, what did he do? Back up against the cage, didn't really throw anything with any meaning whatsoever, got taken down. And even in a Junior Albini fight for Rozenstruik, people talk about that as a good win because he landed the head kick. I saw him get taken down and controlled on the ground there. I think Rozenstruik's going to go out there with the intention of KOing Augusto Sakai in the first round. I don't see him KOing Augusto Sakai in the first round. I mean, Sakai wasn't even KO'd against Overeem. I know they had to stop it because of the brutality of the shots. But Augusto Sakai's got a really good chin. He's a real good grinder. I think he can get through the fight. And as it goes on, I think the pressure's going to be a little bit too much. And I think that Augusto Sakai is looking at this matchup and thinking to himself, I got this one. I can pressure him up against the cage, I can take him down, I can wear on him, and I can be the bigger guy out there. I know it still fucking says that Rozenstruik is 6'4". He's going to be undersized, and Augusto Sakai's got decent cardio as well. And I think he's going to be too much for Rozenstruik in the early rounds of this fight, and I think he's going to take him down, move him up against the cage, and just be too big in the clinch exchanges. I've got Augusto Sakai getting it done, not to mention, he's got pretty good strike and defense on the feet as well, does Augusto Sakai. And again, he was straight up battering over him against the cage. I'm going to go with Augusto Sakai, walking down Rozenstruik being too hesitant to throw shots. One thing I like about Augusto Sakai is that he throws a lot of kicks for a heavyweight, which is sometimes good. At range, he doesn't just swing bombs from the outside, which is where Rozenstruik can catch you on the chin. I like that he picks at the legs, he throws kicks to the body, he throws head kicks as well. I think he's going to go out there, throw a bunch of random stuff in the open, then eventually get Rozenstruik against the cage. And I just can't trust Rozenstruik, man. When it's not anything but being a pussy, it's hard to side with someone. Because against Cyril Gane, it wasn't an injury. It wasn't the fact that he got concussed and couldn't bounce back. It was straight up he didn't want to fucking win because he knew he couldn't. Like, he just didn't even bother fucking trying. And I think against a guy like Sakai, who can press you up against the cage and land brutal elbows and inside hooks, I think Rozenstruik's not going to like it after the first round. And if he doesn't get a first round KO, I can see this being a Sakai second round stoppage, ground and pound against Rozenstruik. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. I know you don't like Sakai, but I'm picking him to beat Rozenstruik. Click that button up there. Toodle pip. See you later.